Hello, this is Dr. Eric Bricker, and thank you for watching AHealthcareZ. Today's topic is HOPD, which is a common acronym that people will see in healthcare. It stands for Hospital Outpatient Departments, and we're going to specifically talk about their pricing. Now, this video is in response to viewer requests, so multiple physicians actually asked me to talk about this. So here I am, responsive to you. So we're going to go over this topic. It is very complicated, but I think it'll be worthwhile. Okay, first off, hospitals are paid by insurance carriers and by Medicare also as well more than for services that are done at doctor's offices or at independent facilities. So let me give you an example of that. So an echocardiogram, which is an ultrasound of the heart, it's a painless procedure. It's like a microphone, some jelly. You see like a black and white movie. Okay, great. The actual facility fee for performing that echocardiogram is about $600 when it's performed at a hospital outpatient facility, whereas the facility fee when it's performed at a doctor's office, so like a cardiologist's office, will only be $250. Now that is just the facility fee. That is not to read and interpret the actual echocardiogram, which is done by a cardiologist. That cardiologist might only get paid like $65, whether it's done at the hospital or the doc's office to read it. This is just the facility fee. Now, it's more expensive. It's literally more expensive at the hospital outpatient department because it falls under the hospital system contract. Okay? And for insurance carriers, that hospital system contract has higher reimbursements than individual doctor's office or independent facilities because the large hospital system has more negotiating power. So they can essentially ask for more. And then for Medicare, by the Medicare policies are such that hospital-based services are reimbursed more than doctor-based. So that's a government Medicare decision for that to happen. Okay, so that's setting the stage. Now, what has happened in the healthcare marketplace as a result of this? Hospitals buy doctor practices, specifically like proceduralist and diagnostic doctor practices like cardiologist practices, specifically so. All those echocardiograms that were done for $250 at the doctor's office can now, exact same technician, exact same building, exact same echocardiogram, exact same everything. But just because the ownership changed, they might not even change the sign on the front of the building. All they're doing is changing the tax ID when they bill it, and it'll go from $250 to $600 reimbursement by the insurance network. Now, this literally happened to a cardiology practice of about 12 cardiologists that was associated with the hospital where I used to work. And I used to see this firsthand. Okay, now, Medicare, we talked about that's for insurance carriers. Medicare actually tried to pay less. So they refer to it as site-neutral payment. They wanted to change the rules such that if, let's say, an echocardiogram was done at an outpatient department versus a doc's office, that would actually be paid the same, and it would not be paid at these quote-unquote higher doctor rates. Now, a court struck that down just recently in Washington, D.C. And interestingly, I'll leave a link in the show notes. The reason the judge struck this down, which was a huge win for the American Hospital Association and a huge loss for CMS and Medicare, was that the judge said, look, Medicare is probably doing the right thing in changing this rule so that they can save money. However, Medicare went about it wrong. You just sort of like snapped your fingers, Medicare, and said that you were going to pay these outpatient departments less, and you only picked it for certain types of doctors and certain services. You basically went about it wrong. There's a statute that says that you have a committee that has to decide this, and you didn't do that. So the judge didn't say that Medicare can't do this or that they shouldn't do this. The court just said that the way that they did it was wrong. So they struck it down. So for now, Medicare is still paying hospital outpatient departments more than doc's office. Okay, and this was seen as a huge win for all the hospitals and the American Hospital Association. Okay, now the money at stake here is not trivial. It is a big deal, and I want to take you to this point now. So there's a fantastic email newsletter from a company called GIST. And I encourage you, it's a small hospital healthcare consulting firm. It's actually people that used to be with the advisory board, which was a very specialized, very large healthcare consulting firm that was then bought by United Healthcare. And some of the top people then left to form GIST. And they have a weekly newsletter that comes out that I read. So please read it as well. It's awesome. And One of the people at GIST was talking to a hospital COO who said, look, we're having this discussion at the hospital around how these higher outpatient bills are affecting our patients. And guess what? It causes a bunch of noise, because if a patient has a higher deductible, let's say $1,000 or $2,000 deductible, then they're, instead of getting charged $250 at the doctor's office, their bill's going to go up to $600. And so the patients were calling into the hospital and complaining. They're like, look, I went to a doctor's office and it used to be this and now it's this. Literally, I had an echo a year ago and now I had it the next year, and it went up almost by 300%. And like, why is that? So the doctors were actually advocating for their patients and saying, look, we got to change this way we're billing this stuff because our patients are getting slammed. And the hospital COO said, look, I agree with where the doctors are coming from. However, our hospital would lose $40 million if we did that, which is our entire margin. Okay? The hospital's entire margin was based upon billing outpatient departments like they were at the hospital and getting paid more. So financially, this is a big deal for hospitals. Now, the American Hospital Association, I'll leave a link in the show notes for this, they try to justify this with all of these points of ding, 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 ding. This is why, this is why, this is why, this is why, this is why. Okay, but I would say that the vast majority of that, in my opinion, is not the real reason. And the real reason is just one of the points that they list, which is it is done to compensate for uncompensated care. In other words, hospitals charge these larger amounts at these outpatient departments to make up for the fact they lose on OBGYN, or they lose money in the ER, or they lose money on their inpatient psych ward. So, again, this is another example of, kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul within the healthcare system. And at the end of the day, not only Medicare in this situation, but really employers are paying huge outpatient bills. And oftentimes, that whole story that I just told you is hidden, and so now you know. And thank you for watching AHealthcareZ.